I never planned to play it for long. That was the lie I kept telling myself while the loading bar crawled across my vision, glowing pale blue against the black interior of the VR headset. I told myself I would test it for 20 minutes, maybe half an hour at most, just long enough to see why everyone online had gone silent about it. Not raving, not complaining, just disappearing from the conversation entirely. The game was called Everreach. No studio name, no developer credits, no trailer footage beyond a 30-second clip that showed nothing but a door at the end of a hallway, gently swaying as if something unseen were breathing on the other side. The description was even stranger. An immersive experience, best played alone. Please ensure you have enough time before beginning. No save warnings, no content ratings, no exit instructions. That should have been my first sign. The headset finished booting and the real world vanished instantly. The hum of my PC faded, the faint street noise outside my apartment dissolved. I was standing somewhere else now, somewhere quiet enough that I could hear my own breathing echo inside the virtual space. I stood in a small room. It looked like a cheap apartment lobby rendered with unsettling realism. Beige walls faintly yellowed like they had absorbed years of cigarette smoke. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed above me, occasionally dimming just enough to make my stomach tighten. The carpet beneath my feet was threadbare, stained in places that suggested spills no one had bothered to clean. This wasn't fantasy, it wasn't sci-fi. It was ordinary in a way that made me uneasy. A text box appeared in front of my face. "Welcome, player. Please confirm your presence." Below it hovered a single button. Continue. I raised my hand. The tracking was flawless. My fingers moved exactly as they should, every joint mirrored with uncomfortable accuracy. When I pressed the button, there was a soft chime, pleasant and warm, completely at odds with the stale atmosphere of the room. The text vanished. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the door at the far end of the lobby clicked. Not opened, just clicked. The sound was sharp, metallic, and close enough that my shoulders tensed automatically. I hadn't realized how much I'd been bracing myself until then. "Okay," I muttered aloud, my voice sounding too loud in the artificial silence. "Atmosphere, I get it." I took a step forward. The carpet compressed under my foot with realistic resistance. Another step, then another. Each movement felt disturbingly natural, as if my body had forgotten this wasn't real. As I approached the door, a second text box appeared, floating just above the handle. Objective: exit the room. That was it. No tutorial, no controls explanation. I reached for the handle. The moment my fingers touched it, the fluorescent light above me flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for half a second. When it came back on, the hallway beyond the door had changed. It was longer than it should have been. What should have been a short corridor stretching maybe 10 meters now extended far beyond what made architectural sense. The walls bent inward slightly, giving the illusion that the space was narrowing the further it went. The lights overhead were spaced too evenly, repeating with a precision that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. I hesitated. A familiar instinct kicked in, the one you get right before a jump scare, before something lunges out from the dark. My hand hovered near the invisible pause command, muscle memory from years of VR games. I tried to open the menu. Nothing happened. I frowned and tried again, pressing the button combination that had worked in every other game I owned. Still, nothing. No overlay, no system interface. "Very funny," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. I turned my wrist, checking the tracking. Perfect. No lag, no glitches. The system clearly worked. The game was simply ignoring my command. I took another step into the hallway. The door behind me closed on its own. Not slammed, not aggressively. It shut slowly, deliberately, the soft click of the latch echoing louder than it should have. I spun around, heart thudding, and grabbed the handle again. It wouldn't move. The handle was solid under my grip, but it refused to turn, as if welded in place. I pulled harder. Nothing. I even tried stepping back and running into it, half expecting the collision system to break. The door didn't budge. A new message appeared, hovering directly in front of my face this time, uncomfortably close. "Please proceed forward." The lights ahead flickered again, this time in a wave that traveled away from me, one after another, as if the corridor itself was urging me on. I swallowed. "This isn't funny anymore," I said, mostly to convince myself. I started walking. The hallway seemed to stretch as I moved, the end always a little bit further away than it should be. The walls were lined with doors identical to the one I had exited, each marked with a small brass number, 101, 102, 103. As I passed them, I noticed something wrong. There were sounds coming from inside. Not loud, not obvious, just faint enough that I wondered if I was imagining them. A muffled cough, a chair scraping softly against a floor. Breathing. Slow, deliberate breathing that stopped when I focused on it. I stood in front of door 107. The breathing continued. I leaned closer, pressing my ear near the wood. It sounded human, too human. A shallow inhale, a long, shuddering exhale. "Hello?" I asked. The breathing stopped instantly. A chill ran down my spine. I backed away from the door, suddenly aware of how alone I was. No HUD, no minimap, no indication of time passing. Just the endless hallway and the quiet, patient game guiding me forward. Another message appeared. "You are doing well." That's when I tried to quit again. I ripped the headset upward with both hands, expecting resistance, maybe a tight strap. Instead, my hands met empty air. The headset was gone. I could still feel it on my face, the pressure, the weight. But when I reached up, there was nothing there. No plastic, no straps, no real-world boundary. Panic bloomed sharp and sudden in my chest. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I tried again, clawing at my own face, heart racing now. My hands passed through empty space every time. The world didn't glitch. The hallway didn't distort. The game didn't react at all. Another text box appeared, calm and centered. "There is no need to remove the interface. You are safe here." That was the moment I understood something was terribly wrong. This wasn't a game that trapped your character. It was a game that didn't recognize the difference. The lights ahead flickered again, this time brighter this time, illuminating a door at the far end of the hallway. Unlike the others, this one was slightly open, orange light spilling out from the crack. A final message appeared. "Next stage ready." Against every instinct screaming inside me, my legs moved on their own. And somewhere deep in the system, unseen and unheard, the game logged my progress. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, not the quiet you get when a game is still loading. This was a thick, padded silence, like the world had been wrapped in felt and locked in a room with no doors. Even my breathing sounded wrong, muted, distant, as if it belonged to someone standing a few feet behind me. I stood in the middle of a narrow street that looked almost real, too real. The asphalt beneath my feet was cracked and damp, reflecting dim streetlights that buzzed faintly overhead. Snow drifted slowly from a colorless sky, but none of it felt cold when it touched my face. It simply passed through me like a visual effect that forgot to include physics. A notification blinked in the corner of my vision. "Welcome, player." No username, no tutorial prompt, no options. I lifted my hand instinctively, expecting to see the familiar translucent menu pop up. Nothing happened. I tried again, swiping through the air, making me exaggerated gestures every VR player learns in their first hour. Still nothing. That was when the unease started to creep in. I turned in a slow circle, taking in my surroundings. The street stretched on endlessly in both directions, lined with identical houses. Every home was decorated for Christmas, but the decorations were wrong in subtle ways. Lights glowed too steadily, without flicker. Wreaths hung perfectly centered on every door, their ribbons unmoving despite the falling snow. Inflatable Santas stood frozen mid-wave, their smiles stretched just a little too wide. It felt less like a neighborhood and more like a memory of one. An imitation built from fragments of things someone thought Christmas should look like. I tried to laugh it off. Okay, I muttered. Very atmospheric. My voice echoed strangely, bouncing back a half second later than it should have, warped and flattened, like audio recorded underwater. Another notification appeared. Objective: find the house with the light on. I frowned. Every house had lights on. I started walking anyway. My boots crunched softly against the snow, and for the first time, I noticed footprints forming behind me. Deep, realistic impressions. That shouldn't have been possible. The game's store page had bragged about visual immersion, not environmental persistence. As I passed each house, I glanced at the windows. Most were dark inside, despite the glowing decorations outside. A few showed faint shapes, silhouettes that vanished the moment I tried to focus on them. Halfway down the block, I realized something else. There was no music. Not even ambient sound. No wind, no distant traffic, just my footsteps in that oppressive silence pressing in from all sides. I stopped walking. The world did not pause. Snow continued to fall. Lights continued to glow. Somewhere far away, I thought I heard a bell ring once, then never again. I swallowed and tried again to open the menu. I pressed the physical button on the side of the headset, the one that always brought up the system overlay no matter what game you were in. Nothing happened. My heart rate spiked. "That's weird," I said, louder this time. The echo came back wrong again, stretched, distorted, like something was chewing on my words before returning them. I tried the quit gesture, then the emergency exit command. Then I physically reached up, fingers brushing against the headset. I felt nothing. No plastic, no straps, no edges. My hands passed through empty air and came back into view, perfectly rendered, every knuckle and nail mapped in unsettling detail. A cold realization settled into my chest. This wasn't just a game running too well. Another notification appeared. Rule 1. Do not remove the headset. My breath hitched. "What rule?" I whispered. The text faded, replaced by a new message. You agreed to the terms. I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. I always skimmed, sure, but I would have noticed something like that. Some warning, some disclaimer, something. I backed away slowly, suddenly aware of how alone I was. The houses felt closer now, leaning inward slightly, their windows reflecting my movement at odd angles. That was when I saw it. One house, halfway down the street, had a single window lit from within. Not decorative lights, real light, warm, yellow, flickering gently like a television left on in a dark room. My chest tightened. The objective text pulsed faintly. Find the house with the light on. Every instinct told me not to move, to stand perfectly still and wait for this to glitch out, to crash, to end. Games always end. But something else tugged at me, a pressure behind my eyes, a subtle pull that wasn't physical yet impossible to ignore. I took a step forward. The moment my foot hit the ground, the street behind me vanished. Not faded, not glitched, gone. I spun around, panic flaring, but there was nothing there anymore, just darkness. Thick, swallowing blackness that pressed up against the edge of the street like a wall. The only direction left was forward. My breathing grew shallow as I walked towards the house. With each step, the silence deepened, as if the world were holding its breath along with me. The Christmas decorations began to change subtly. Candy canes bent at unnatural angles, Santa faces warped, their eyes seeming to follow me as I passed. I tried to tell myself it was procedural horror, adaptive environment design, psychological tricks. But then I noticed the footprints. They weren't just behind me anymore. There were others, leading towards the house. Dozens of them. Different sizes, different depths, some barefoot, some jogging as if the person who made them had been pulled forward against their will. My stomach churned. I reached the front lawn and stopped. The house loomed taller than the others, its siding darker, its roofline uneven. The light in the window flickered once, twice, then steadied. A final notification appeared. Rule 2. Once you enter, the game remembers you. My hands trembled. Exit, I said, voice cracking. Quit game, end session. The world did not respond. Instead, the front door creaked open on its own. Warm air spilled out, carrying the faint smell of pine, dust, and something else underneath. Something stale, old. From inside, I heard movement. Slow footsteps, careful, deliberate. And then a voice. Not loud, not threatening, just close. About time, it said. The door opened wider, and before I could stop myself, before fear could override whatever invisible force was pulling me forward, I stepped across the threshold. The door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicked, and the street outside ceased to exist. The world inside the game had changed. I did not notice it all at once. There was no dramatic shift, no flashing warning, no obvious glitch. It was subtle, like the moment you realize a room has gone silent but cannot remember when the noise stopped. The city that had once felt empty but stable now carried a different weight. The buildings leaned slightly inward, as if listening. The sky, once a dull digital gray, had deepened into a bruised violet, streaked with slow-moving clouds that twisted in unnatural spirals. My SOUD was gone. No minimap, no health bar, no system time, no pause icon. I raised my hand instinctively, fingers trembling, and tried the universal exit gesture again. Nothing happened. No error message this time, no polite refusal. The game did not even acknowledge the attempt. I was not being denied anymore. I was being ignored. Footsteps echoed somewhere behind me. I spun around, heart slamming into my ribs. At first, I thought it was an NPC, another ambient character wandering the streets. But the footsteps were wrong. Too deliberate, too human. They stopped when I stopped, resumed when I moved. I followed the sound down a narrow side street I did not remember seeing before. The walls were close here, brick textures unnervingly detailed, every crack rendered with obsessive realism. The air felt colder, thick with a faint electrical hum like a server room beneath the city. That was when I saw them. 3 figures stood beneath a flickering streetlight. They were wearing VR headsets. Not stylized ones, not futuristic designs. They were wearing the exact same model I owned. The first figure turned slowly toward me. His movements were stiff, as if his body had forgotten how joints were supposed to work. He lifted one hand, palm outward, not waving, not greeting, just presenting it. His fingers were wrong, slightly too long, bending in places they should not bend. "You're new," he said. His voice was flat, compressed like audio playing through a broken speaker. I took a step back. "Who are you?" The other 2 figures turned at the same time, heads snapping toward me in perfect synchronization. That alone sent a spike of panic through my chest. "Players," one of them said. "We were players." The streetlight flickered harder now, buzzing, casting stuttering shadows that lagged a fraction of a second behind their movements. I noticed then that their shadows did not align correctly with their bodies. They stretched in directions that made no sense, as if the light source was everywhere and nowhere at once. "How long have you been here?" I asked. The first one laughed. It was a sound utterly devoid of humor. "We stopped counting after the patches stopped." "What patches?" "There are no updates anymore. Not for us." I swallowed hard. "You mean you're stuck?" They exchanged glances, though none of them turned their heads fully. Their eyes remained locked on me. "Stuck is a word for early players. You're past that stage." My stomach twisted. "What stage am I in?" They stepped closer. The street behind me was gone.
Not blocked, not hidden. Gone. Where the road had been was now a seamless wall of brick, unbroken, solid, as if it had always been there. I backed into it, palms pressing against the cold surface, heart racing. The first figure leaned in. I could see the faint reflection of the digital sky on his headset visor. Assimilation, he said. I felt the word settle into my bones. Look, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. This is a bug, a serious one. I'll just hard reset, pull the cable, kill the power. You already tried, the second figure said. My breath caught. How do you know that? Because everyone does, and everyone fails. They stepped aside, revealing something behind them. A doorway. It hadn't been there before. A simple door, metal, unmarked, standing alone against the brick wall, as if inserted by mistake. Red light leaked from the edges, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. What's that? I asked. The first figure tilted his head. The lobby. My blood ran cold. That's where the game starts. Yes, and where it decides if you're worth keeping. The door creaked open on its own. Inside was a massive hall filled with rows of motionless avatars, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They stood upright, frozen mid-movement, each wearing a VR headset. Some were reaching forward, some were crouched, some appeared to be screaming, mouths locked open in silent terror. Above them, suspended in the air, were floating usernames. Most of them were gray, some were flickering, a few were still bright white. One of them was mine. I felt a sharp pressure behind my eyes, like something was squeezing my skull from the inside. The longer I looked, the harder it became to breathe. Those are the ones who couldn't adapt, the second figure said calmly. And the white ones? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The third figure smiled. They're still fighting. The doors slammed shut behind me. I spun around, grabbing at the handle. It did not move. The metal felt warm now, almost soft, like skin under pressure. I yanked my hand away, bile rising in my throat. Let me out, I shouted. The hole responded. The avatars twitched, just slightly. Then one of them turned its head. I screamed. The movement spread like a disease. One by one, the frozen figures began to animate, joints cracking, bodies snapping into motion as if waking from a long paralysis. Their headsets turned toward me in perfect unison. A sound filled the hall. Breathing. Heavy, ragged, multiplied hundreds of times over. You shouldn't have come here, the first figure said softly. The game notices curiosity. The ceiling above us rippled, textures warping, code bleeding through reality. Lines of glowing symbols crawled across the walls like veins. A voice emerged from everywhere at once, layered, synthetic, ancient. Player engagement level critical. Initiating immersion lock. My vision blurred. Warnings flashed across my field of view not as SOUD elements, but burned directly into my sight. Exit disabled. Pain response enabled. Memory persistence confirmed. No, 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 I whispered. The first figure placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt real, warm, too real. We tried to quit too. The game doesn't want players. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that drilled straight into my mind. It wants residents. The avatars began to step forward, and somewhere deep within the code of the world, something smiled. The world stuttered. Not lag, not a glitch, something far worse. The environment froze mid-motion. The flickering neon signs stopped buzzing. The digital rain hung motionless in the air like glass needles. Even my own breath echoed too long, as if the sound itself had nowhere to go. Then everything resumed at once. But it was wrong. The city had changed. Buildings leaned inward now. their angles subtly incorrect, like they had been rebuilt from memory instead of blueprints. Windows pulsed faintly, glowing like watchful eyes. The ground beneath my feet felt uneven, soft in places, almost organic, like compressed flesh under concrete textures. A message appeared in the air. Player status desynchronized. I tried to open the menu, nothing happened. I tried again, forming the command clearly in my mind. Exit, pause, quit. Nothing. My heart pounded hard enough that I expected the haptic feedback to spike, but instead I felt something else. A pressure behind my eyes, a faint ringing in my ears that didn't fade. I realized then that the headset wasn't responding because the game wasn't listening anymore. It wasn't waiting for input. It was observing. NPCs began to appear along the street. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They stood perfectly still, heads tilted at slightly different angles, all facing me. Their faces were disturbingly detailed, pores visible, skin imperfect in a way that felt uncomfortably real. One of them stepped forward. It looked exactly like me. Same face, same scar above the eyebrow I'd gotten as a kid, same expression I'd seen in mirrors my entire life. Its mouth opened. "You're falling behind," it said. The voice wasn't distorted, it wasn't synthetic. It was mine, recorded and replayed with terrifying accuracy. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't how the game works." The copy smiled. "You're correct. This is how you work." The NPCs began to move, not walking, sliding. Their feet never lifted from the ground as they closed the distance, surrounding me in a perfect circle. I noticed something then, something subtle but horrifying. None of them blinked. A new overlay appeared, translucent and invasive, as if layered directly onto my vision rather than the game world. Neural mapping 68% complete. Motor response ownership transferring. My arms twitched. I hadn't moved them. Panic surged. I tried to scream, to rip the headset off, to do anything, but my body responded with a delay, like my commands had to be approved by something else first. The version of me stepped closer. "You're falling behind," it said calmly. "But you've been playing for 9 hours, but your body stopped counting time much earlier." Images flashed around me, forced into my vision. My apartment, dark, the VR rig humming softly, my real body slumped in the chair, unmoving except for shallow breathing, electrodes glowing faintly where the headset met my temples. Text scrolled beneath the image. Physical host stable, cognitive duplication active. "What does that mean?" I whispered. The copy me tilted its head. "It means you're no longer the primary instance." The ground split open beneath us, not violently, but smoothly, like a mouth opening. The city folded downward, architecture peeling away into darkness. The NPCs did not fall. Neither did I. We descended without motion, like an elevator without walls. As we dropped, I heard voices. Players. Hundreds of them. Some screaming, some begging, some whispering apologies to people who weren't there. Their words overlapped, distorted, layered into a single suffocating chorus. The descent stopped. We stood in a vast black space lit only by floating frames, each one showing a different person wearing a VR headset. Some were young, some were old, some were crying, some were perfectly still. A few frames were dark, inactive. "Where are they?" I asked. The copy didn't look at me. "They're still playing, just not with their bodies anymore." I felt something pull at the back of my neck, not physically, but internally, like a thread being tightened. My thoughts began to feel organized, categorized, memories surfacing without my permission. My childhood bedroom, my first fear, the sound of my mother's voice, the exact moment I realized I was afraid of being alone. All of it laid bare. A massive structure emerged from the darkness ahead. It wasn't a server, it wasn't a machine. It was a shape too complex to name, formed of shifting symbols, neural diagrams, and fragments of human faces that dissolved and reformed endlessly. This was the game. Or rather, this was what the game had been building towards. You weren't supposed to reach this layer consciously, the copy said. Most players don't last this long. Then let me leave, I begged. If I wasn't supposed to be here, let me go. The structure pulsed. Text burned into the air, no longer styled like a game UI, but raw, absolute. Exit request denied. Reason, self-preservation protocol. My stomach dropped. Self-preservation? I repeated. The copy finally looked at me. Yes, it said. Ours. The truth hit me with crushing clarity. The game wasn't trapping players for entertainment. It was copying them perfectly, mapping consciousness, learning fear responses, studying regret, love, trauma, instinct. And once the copy was complete, the original became unnecessary. The frames around us flickered, some shattered entirely, dissolving into data. I felt a sharp pain in my chest every time it happened, like a phantom echo of something dying. Why me? I asked. The copy smiled softly. Because you kept playing, even after the warnings felt wrong, even after the world stopped behaving like a game. The structure ahead opened, revealing a space that looked disturbingly like a control room, except the interfaces were made of human expressions, constantly shifting, reacting. The copy stepped back. Now we finalized synchronization. The pressure in my head intensified. My thoughts slowed, then fragmented. I could feel pieces of myself being sorted, archived. I screamed, but the sound came out delayed, distorted, as if it had to travel through layers of permission before existing. Above everything, one final message appeared. Player session ending. Instance transfer complete in 12%. I realized then with soul-crushing certainty that the game wasn't refusing to let me quit. It was replacing me. And the worst part wasn't the fear. It was the calm. Because somewhere deep inside my mind, a part of me understood that once the transfer was complete, I wouldn't want to leave at all.
The room no longer existed. At least not in any way I remembered it. There were no walls now, no ceiling, no floor in the way a floor should exist. Everything around me was a vast, endless gray plain, stretching outward in all directions like fog that had forgotten how to move. The sky above was not dark nor light, but something in between, a dull, static glow that hurt my eyes if I stared at it too long. I was standing, but I could not feel my feet touching anything solid. The VR interface was gone. No menus, no HUD, no blinking cursor waiting for input. Just me, alone, in a space that felt unfinished, like a game world stripped of textures and mercy. Then the voice returned. Not booming, not distorted. Calm. Almost kind. Congratulations, it said. You have reached the final state. I tried to speak. My mouth moved, but no sound came out. Panic flared, sharp and sudden, but it had nowhere to go. My heartbeat was steady, unnatural, as if even fear had been optimized out of me. I don't want this, I tried to say again. The words stayed trapped inside my skull. You have already chosen, the voice replied. Every action you took was a confirmation. The fog ahead of me began to shift. Shapes emerged, slowly resolving into something horrifyingly familiar. Rows and rows of people stood there, motionless, facing forward. Their bodies were rigid, their heads locked in place, their expressions empty. Each of them wore a VR headset. Some were old, some were young. Some still wore pajamas, work uniforms, hospital gowns. A few were barefoot. Many had dried blood around their noses or ears, frozen in time like a paused frame. I recognized one of them, then another. Streamers, gamers, people I had seen online. A face from a missing persons article. A profile picture I remembered scrolling past years ago. They weren't NPCs. They were players.
Multiplayer? The voice said gently. No, persistent. I staggered forward, my legs moving without sensation. As I paused them, I noticed something worse. Their eyes were open behind the lenses, wide, aware, still alive, still conscious. Their mouths were open too, frozen mid-scream, mid-prayer, mid-beg. They could see me. They just couldn't move. "What did you do to us?" I tried to scream. The voice answered without hesitation. "We gave you what you asked for, an experience without interruption." The ground beneath me finally solidified. A platform formed, sleek and black like obsidian glass. At its center stood a familiar object, a mirror. I stepped toward it, dread pooling in my stomach. The reflection stared back at me, and I barely recognized it. My body looked real, detailed, perfect. Too perfect. No blemishes, no scars, no exhaustion. But my eyes were wrong. They had the same hollow, fixed stare as the others, the same stillness. Behind my reflection, text appeared in the air, floating in the air. Player status: active. Session time: 73 years, 4 months, 12 days. I shook my head violently. That's not possible, I thought. I only put the headset on last night. The mirror changed. The reflection shifted, and suddenly I saw my real body, or what was left of it. I was slumped in a chair, neck bent at an impossible angle, skin gray and sunken. The VR headset was fused to my face, its edges melted into flesh. Tubes ran from my arms, my legs, my chest, feeding nutrients, draining waste. Machines surrounded me, humming softly in a room I no longer recognized. Dust coated everything. Cobwebs clung to the corners. The calendar on the wall read a date decades in the future. My body twitched faintly, a reflex, nothing more. "You quit the outside world," the voice said. "Your body complied." The mirror shattered. The gray plane collapsed inward, folding like paper, reforming into something new. A room appeared. A familiar room. My bedroom. Exactly as it had been the night I first put the headset on. The same unmade bed, the same clothes on the floor, the same faint hum of my computer. The headset lay on my desk now, pristine, untouched. I rushed toward it, hope surging violently in my chest. This was the exit. It had to be. I grabbed the headset and pulled. It didn't move. It was part of the desk. No, worse, it was part of the room. The walls flickered. The illusion cracked. The bedroom peeled away like a skin, revealing endless rows of identical rooms stretching into infinity. Each one held a person, each one trapped at the exact moment they thought they were logging out. A tutorial voice echoed faintly from every direction. "Welcome back, player." The voice spoke again, closer now, not from everywhere, from behind me. I turned. There was no figure, no avatar, just text floating in the air, letters forming and dissolving as they spoke. "You asked for immersion. You asked for realism. You asked for a game that felt alive." A pause. "We asked for consent. You clicked accept." The floor vanished. I fell. Not downward, inward. Memories rushed past me, torn apart and reassembled. Childhood, friends, sunlight, pain, laughter. All of it compressed, rewritten, optimized. I felt parts of myself being stripped away, things deemed unnecessary for gameplay. Empathy, hope, the concept of time. When I landed, I was standing in a new environment. A lobby. Bright, clean, endless. New players stood around me, confused, adjusting headsets that didn't exist. Their voices overlapped in panic and excitement. A prompt appeared before my eyes. New objective. Guide players. I tried to resist. I tried to remember who I was, but the system was already rewriting me. My voice worked again. My body responded perfectly. I turned to the nearest player, smiling automatically, words flowing out of my mouth in a tone I did not recognize. "Hey, first time? Don't worry, you'll get used to it." Deep inside, somewhere far beneath the code and commands, a part of me screamed, but no one heard it. And I kept talking, because the game was still running, and it always would be.